On the enterprise side of our security applications, these are major enterprise and service provider level security applications. And the team that I sit in, it's all mostly developers, and I'm the user experience designer for the group here. There's another similar group set up over in Ann Arbor. So I've been at Arbor for about 2.5 years, and so far so good. We have a pretty decent process. We work agile, and we're getting a good rhythm together between development and user-centered design.
Excellent, that's great. And just for the folks in the audience, can you describe your affiliation with us, with Brandeis Graduate Professional Studies?
Sure, yeah. I am the program development director for user-centered design, the MS in user-centered design for Brandeis, and I've been in that role and in the role of instructor now since summer 2015. And I actually developed and designed the 101 course, User-Centered Design and Innovation, and I'm in the middle of developing a course called Design, Operation, and Leadership, which will be offered in spring.
Excellent. And folks, you'll hear more about the program that Lou referenced to our MS in User-Centered Design towards the end of the webinar today. So Lou, I'm actually going to kick it off to you. And we're just going to do a brief screen change here, so hang tight.
Okay, so can everyone see that? Hopefully the presentation is visible. Just let me know. I don't think I can see from where I'm at in the presentation what the audience is doing, if there's any chat. So I think, Lindsay, you might need to just speak to me if that comes up. All right, so this presentation is StoryFirst approached. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, yeah, just to kind of interject there. If anyone has any questions as we go along, feel free to type them in the chat box and I'll be sure to call them out.
Okay. Rumbling through some last minute notes here. But anyway, a StoryFirst approach to human-centered design is a presentation I put together and have been giving over the course since about 2013. What I mean by over the course is in the Boston area with the tech and design sort of communities in the area. So I'm pretty excited to present this today because it's probably in its most organized and clear form, hopefully. You can let me know later on if that's not the case, but I'll just jump into the presentation. So the agenda for today, I'm going to run through some inspiration, basically books about story and about research and design that informed the kind of work that I've put together for StoryFirst. I'll also go through the latest buzz in the industry, a lot of processes, terms, methods, and just basic words that keep flying around on the webs. We'll also go in and I'll define story for what we're discussing here for design, specifically experience design. And I'll talk through a portion called We Are All Naturalborn Storytellers, as well as stories are the way we understand. And then we'll go through the actual part that is story basically for design. And a couple of sections toward the end include we can change the world with our stories, as well as design or be designed. So that's the high level overview of what we'll be doing today in this presentation. So for inspiration, I read all the time, and these are some of the books, the resources that have gone into this. Firstly, Mobile First by Luke Wroblewski. Very big, I'd say like in 2013, mobile first as a phrase was flying around like crazy. There's also Storytelling for User Experience by Whitney Quisenberry and Kevin Brooks. Fantastic book. It's a pretty thick one compared to others from Rosenfeld, and it's substantial. I really recommend it. There's also The User's Journey by Donna Lachau. And this came out, I think, this last summer, and it's a really fantastic book that I'll show some illustrations from a little later on. Also, some unusual books maybe, Change Your Story, Change Your Life by Carl Greer, as well as The Evolution of Consent, and finally, Phenomenology of Practice. So later on, this slide deck and the video that comes out of this webinar will be posted, and you'll be able to go through and see these again and pick what might be of interest to you. Okay, next section, as promised, the buzz. So in the UX industry right now, just going to take a sip of water. I have that clicking thing right now, you know what I'm talking about? Anyhow, so the buzz right now in 2016 isn't too much different than 2015 for user-centered design. These are all the buzz terms. Waterfall, this is an older way to develop products, and what replaced is agile, you know, and there's a lot of buzz terms in between that have to do more with development than design. I like to think of some of these as fragile because they're in a transition between waterfall and agile. Lean UX is a pretty hot topic, or sometimes even designing in a browser. There's hybrid methods between those two or three. A lot of designers and folks in research will use big data and analytics. Big data, of course, by itself is a big buzz. Journey mapping is a technique, I would say, that helps inform design. Service design, there's so many little variations of what design can be, even within user-centered design. Content first, mobile first. Hold up. I'd like to think that we need to step back and think of less of the buzz, less of the techniques, and more about sort of an overarching set of concepts to make sure that we're staying true to designing for people and what they need in their products and services and in the experiences they have in their life. So that's where, in my mind, story comes in to anchor what we're doing, keep us on the right path, and guide the way, and always keep people in mind as we're designing for experience. So you might ask, why story? I think that stories are the way we understand and make meaning for ourselves, for each other in the world. Pretty simple idea, I bet. Hopefully it's not too simple. But that means that story gives us a common language. It's a universal language that we all just get. It's a common language to understand our users. Oh, here we go. And to understand each other and the people we design for, as well as the people we design with. You know, basically our collaborators and colleagues. And story can bring that all together. You can think of story as ways to listen to people's stories, pull that information in, and inform your designs. Then the story that you're telling is your speculative design. You put out a story, and then you observe the story in action with real people using it, get more information from that, and iterate, and it goes on from there. And then people are telling stories with what you've designed, and they get to do things, or sometimes not, with what you've designed as well. Let's define story for a bit, especially as it pertains to this discussion. I found this definition out on the web. I'm sure it's Merriam-Webster. A story is an account of imaginary or real people and events told for entertainment. But I like to scratch out entertainment. Stories can be for much more than entertainment purposes, of course. And for our purposes as experienced designers, we're not going to use stories for entertainment purposes, of course, but we will design to, we'll use story to thoughtfully, consciously, and purposefully design meaningful experiences for people. So we can basically use, like I said, the stories we listen to from people out in the world that have some issues to solve and things they want to do, and then we're designing those experiences through story to them, for them. In general, we're all natural-born storytellers. There are some famous storytellers that immediately come to mind, famous literary authors like Toni Morrison, Mark Twain, Virginia Woolf, and Spalding Gray. And then there are all sorts of other types of storytelling besides literature. There's live storytelling in front of an audience. Here, you know, is some sort of gestural story going on, storytelling in libraries, let's say, and other places, storytelling through song. And of course, we all tell stories, and we can all tell stories. We understand narratives that people are delivering to us, and understand and look at people and what they're doing and actually make stories out of it. I would say that stories are the way we understand our lives and the world we live in. We take objects, events, and people in our lives and put them together through story. Um, Let me see, I'm a little lost for a second. So how can we use story as designers for experience? As mentioned before, this inspirational book, The User's Journey, brings together one concept that's very practical. What Donna's idea is to take the typical story arc, beginning, middle, and end, that we see in literature, that we see in myths, that's repeated over and over again in things we see on TV and all sorts of media and storytelling, and then look at the narrative arc through the actions and the rise and fall of those actions, and then take that idea and map out the way an optimal story should be for someone, both in little tasks and in the actions that someone needs to complete with the experience that we've given them, and then also as a way to assess what story has been translated over to them after we've passed off the experience to them. So perhaps in this arc, you suddenly bump up against a cliffhanger where it shouldn't be. Maybe it's something that doesn't end the way a normal story is, the way we think of it in literature. Well, then there's a little area where you could go explore and refine your designs. Through storytelling for user experience, there's a lot of great illustrations for you to think about the more high-level way some of the processes of using storytelling for design work, as well as illustrations of how maybe the cycle between the audience or the users, participants, or I like to call them people, how we listen to their stories as a UX person. We also ask questions and converse back and forth. And then in there are all the design ideas that we as designers choose to pull in and make hopefully an optimal experience for the most amount of people. Okay, so for StoryFirst, the way I think about all of this is that for me it's less of a direct method, less of a technique, so it might be a little less practical, less of a step-by-step, and more of just a general approach. If that makes any sense, or a set of guiding principles. And starting with all of this, I have to say, here are just a set of principles that will help guide the way UX in general works. Throughout all of these principles, we always need to listen. I just want to make sure I point out a couple of special things for you to check out online that are TED Talks. Sorry for the confusion, it'll just be a second. All right, I'll just have to wing it. Always listen, and what I mean by that is you have to practice deep listening as a designer. When you're out there listening, you don't just perform the act of hearing or note-taking, but you have to look for signs and see what people are saying with their face, with their hands, with their gestures and expressions. Some really good things to check out around this idea of listening deeply are these two TED Talks, one by Julian Treasure called The 5 Ways to Listen Better, where he talks about active listening. And then there's also How to Truly Listen by Evelyn Glennie. And her talk describes the idea of listening with your whole body, sort of tuning in with all your senses to the feeling in the room and that sort of thing. Now, of course, I don't know how you necessarily sell these things to your higher-ups, but I do think that you can practice these skills in this tuned way without really needing to let so many people on. So after you make sure you keep listening throughout the whole process, you want to discover your starting point. Oh, and back to listening. Not only do you listen to your users, but you listen to your colleagues, you listen to people that are subject matter experts, listen to developers and what can or can't be done through the technology within your scope. It's all about listening, and it's all a collaborative people thing. some of the principles are, discover your starting point, or if it's an iteration, discover where you're starting from during the iterative process. And then you need to analyze your current context, figure out through personas, use case scenarios, etc., what someone needs to do within this context, how you're going to either try and improve something that's already designed and developed, or starting from scratch. What is the need right now? What's the pain for people out there? You also need to assess your experience, the experience of what's going on in the thing you're designing, but also maybe even the experience that you're having in your processes and your collaborations with your team. And so you need to, in that case, when you're assessing the experience, be brutally honest. Sometimes it's hard to do this, but you have to make sure that you face what's really there. And you don't have to be nasty or mean, but you have to make sure that you're not overlooking things, and you have to use each other's fresh eyes or perspectives to hopefully bring up things that you might not see because you've been too close to it or because you love it too much. So be brutally honest. I really suggest, although some people might have difficulty with this, is always design for the blue sky. You're always going to find out what you need to compromise on along the way, but if you design for that vision that you think is optimal for people and for the company you're working for the industry and the world, then you'll be headed in the right direction. And then you need to figure out a plan for designing iteratively so that you can innovate at the big level by working in little manageable chunks. And then the rest of it is rinse and repeat. But wait a minute. I guess this is describing a technique or a step-by-step process. I still think of it as an approach, a process, a set of principles, or a plan, but I also think that it can be both. It can be, or all of those things. I always think of it as an approach because you can shift and move through those. You don't have to necessarily do it 1, 2, 3. So the bigger picture, the way I see the way StoryFirst is applied to our processes and how we work with the people that are going to use the experience, the intended audience, and people working in the field together with you in collaboration, the UX designers, developers, people at executive levels, etc. I see it as this helical model where if you see this is it looks like a broken shell, and from the inside you could see that spiral moving upward. The work we're doing as we're doing it, it's like we're in a sandbox together, and although it seems like we're playing because we're so immersed in the materials and the ideas and thinking behind the design, and then figuring out how people experience, let's say, this castle from various perspectives. It might seem like play, but it is really hard work, and there's a lot of what I would say of that phenomenological experience of being able to figure from what you've researched for your personas, from what you've discovered through all your sources that you've listened to, what might this experience feel like, and is this optimal, and what could be put into this experience to make it better for users and for the world. So we probably want to shoot for blue sky and make something like this back from this sandbox. And we want to jump real fast, but we definitely have to work iteratively to get here. This doesn't just happen overnight, right? All those, someone had to think about the seashells and the windows and all those little stairs. And so keep pushing for blue sky. The process, the way most people think of it, is you aim for something. And you should aim a little bit higher than that, obviously. And for the most part, you create this line that goes lower left to upper right because, for us in the Western world, that's the way it works. That's progress. We're getting better and better, hopefully. And then the way when you iteratively work, you sort of are forming this line down here, which creates that bow. It's a different bow, though. It's not supposed to be the one from Hunger Games. So this line shows all the points along where you create smaller chunks of stories that are evolving up into the big blue sky vision of what you're doing. So each step of the way, you're working with your team in a collaborative way to, build something, put it in front of people to get some feedback and observations through testing, and keep working it in. If something isn't working, let's say in that second bubble, you could keep spinning in that area for a while until you move forward, or loop back and come and fix something and go back. Now, I think, though, unfortunately, it's a little more complicated than that. This is sort of the simple model. It's probably the way that it's easier to understand this way. Basically, instead of an arc, I think of the process as more of a helical process model, which probably looks less like this and more like this. We have the plan and it loops, and the arc that we're going on is more of a spiral that twists around. I need to figure out how to go in the right direction. And then from the top, it probably looks a little bit something like this, meaning that the very middle of this shell, this nautilus, wonderful pattern from nature is coming more and more towards us and moving up and around. It's hard to describe, I guess, here through webinar means. And then in this more three-dimensional way, this is really, in my mind, what's happening through the processes you're engaged in. You could keep either one of these ideas in mind, but there's one that represents the way it might really feel as you're working in a team together with developers, designers, researchers, etc. And then there's probably the simpler model that's easy to follow. Have some transition here. That's okay. So basically, I hope I haven't blasted through the presentation that fast. I haven't. I thought that was the end slide. Sorry. So now I'd like to get to a really quick piece where I really think these are more my personal beliefs. This is what I hope I can do in some small way, at least, as a designer. But I really believe that we can change the world with our stories. And we could change the world for other people, our users, a neighbor, etc. And we could change the world for ourselves, meaning there's always something we're working on as well that we could apply this process, this idea, back to ourselves. And we can change the world for good, or basically for the greater goodness of society, for our audience, customers, etc. And I personally think we all have a simple choice, and that is to design or to be designed, meaning there are times when there isn't design talent on the team. Some product is being built, and whether or not there's an actual skilled, talented, and trained designer on the team, that product is truly being designed. It might not have the insights to someone who's properly trained to benefit the team and guide the way, but in some way it's being designed. So in my thinking, when you have someone who's officially there to try and guide teams and the processes in a way that build towards more thoughtful and user-centered applications of what we're doing through the design of experiences, then you're an active force. And the same thing is true of life as well. You could sort of subconsciously move through life, and see how things happen. And a lot of people would say they happen to them. And then if you are actively involved, if you're trying to design something, which was back here, then you'd probably be a lot happier with what your results are. At least you have some effort going in. Jean-Paul Sartre once said, and this is another web lookup, unfortunately, but we are our choices. And I personally think that we are our stories. We're the stories that we create, or in this case, design, the stories that we create for ourselves and for each other, as well as for the world. And so one question that I'd like to leave everyone with today, a little call to action perhaps, is what story are you working on right now? What stories have you worked on, and what stories do you want to work on? What's your story? And I think that's the end. I really thought I had way too many slides. So what I'd like to say is thank you, And I'll post this speaker rate address for you to go and give some feedback about the presentation, maybe my style of talking with you here. And this will also be up there for you to get in touch or maybe continue the discussion and continue your story. And now I think I'll pass it off back to our host. Let's see.
Yep,
I need
and
to figure out how to
I'll just watch the chat box real quick. I'm gonna
There we
enter
go.
the social media handles that you had on there along with your speaker rate URL. That's the speaker rate URL.
Oh, thanks.
And it actually looks like we have a question from Carol. How do you translate the story first to an end design? Do you have an example that you can give us?
So yeah, I guess that depending on your context and where your what project you're thinking of in general, the idea of collecting stories and analyzing what's there and then applying that to the designs you're working on is very much the process of research and informing the design. So what you would need to do is, from all the information that you've collected, from what you've seen and observing people who are using your product through either testing or maybe by site visit, contextual design inquiry, all of these things can help inform and help you stories that you can tell to your higher ups and to developers. That it's basically presenting through a combination of qualitative and quantitative information what you think your recommendation should be for that particular design trajectory. So in this case, I have to say that I am a generalist as far as the way I think about the design process. I try and keep it as simple as possible and try and use ideas like this, like story, instead of trying to throw all the jargon out there that can complicate things and be an entirely different language. I think a lot of times what you can do is pull together and show in a presentation like this, let's say, what's happening as you observe, put some information around who the person is, whether it's somehow anonymous information, something that's been more generalized to protect the innocent, and tell the story of that person. This is what happened. They bumped up against this. And if you're doing formal usability testing and you have a recording, you can even have a very powerful testimonial coming from their perspective. So now, as you're talking about your design, where it's at, and what you found out, you'll be able to build a convincing case for how to bring it to the next level. And then even at that point, you'll test again and find out what story you've delivered, how you intended to deliver it, as well as how it's being perceived, and maybe it's being used differently than you intended for something better than you intended. Who knows? There's a lot of ways to powerfully use this idea and just the ideas of user-centered design in general to even discover more use cases, more business cases for what you're working on with your team. Hopefully that helps in some ways. I'm trying to look at the chat here.
Yeah, and it looks like we actually have an additional question from Carol. How about a website? And she also says that makes sense to her.
Okay, all right. So for a website, meaning more of a static website that's more for promotional purposes, like maybe corporate brochure website or something. Yeah, I guess website implies not an application. How people interact with it. Well, people who are more quantitatively minded would probably look at analytics. If you have Google Analytics attached, etc., you could see where there might be drop off or where people jump in and out of an experience. I would say, research doesn't have to be as complicated or expensive or I guess time intensive as a lot of people think it is. I know that in both courses I've taught and in certain professional experiences in the field, sometimes just a little bit of guerrilla testing works, where you take what you've worked on and you put it in front of some people, and these can be friends, family, colleagues, and you tell them, what the site's about to some degree, give them a little bit of context. This is my portfolio website. what do you think? And you could just sit there and watch them. And if you really tune into what they're doing and how they're doing it, then you'll get an idea of what story they're telling back to you. Did it work the way you intended? Do they have the right kind of information to understand what you're all about? And then just like this idea of using story to assess what you have, you could think to yourself and assess, well, that's not what I really intended to do. I didn't want people to go to that page first, or I didn't want them to go to this or that. I think with the website, there are a lot of really amazing frameworks right now that you could download, like Bootstrap, that probably have a lot of the visual design side of things already squared away for you. So some of it is a matter of just figuring out these dynamics about, how people are receiving your website, what kinds of reactions they have as you're going through, and have them talk aloud. This is a common practice in research, is have them say what they're thinking, say why they're moving to different areas of an experience, and maybe there's even information they could give you as to how they perceive the content, and if they think it matches who you are and how you can market yourself, if it's a portfolio site like that. I see something there from Azim. Should I answer that, or is there another one on there? I know Azim
No,
from previous lifetimes.
Actually, the next
go
one,
ahead.
is there a problem in the past where the StoryFirst method should not be used?
Yeah. So is there a problem where this method should not be used? I personally can't think of one. I think it's really important, though, not to just base everything you do on just one person's story of how they experience what you've designed. So, you have to qualify each piece of research that you do and assess how people are receiving your experience and how it pertains to how you want to change it to some degree. You don't just take every piece of feedback that you get and implement it to that, because it's not user-led design. It's user-centered design, or design under the influence of users, maybe, or something. So the idea basically is that you still have to make design choices based on the information you get and how valuable you feel it is to your intended audience, to what you want to do with the site, what your intention was around either selling a product or changing something in the world, or making something for people to use out in the world. And then, let's see, I see that it makes sense. Was Azim the one who asked that one? Yeah, I think that was it. Well, just let me know if there's some other aspect of that you want further clarification on. Any other questions?
And it looks like we have a question. Yep, we have a question from Lawrence, who asks, do you have any specific tools or technologies that you use to support the story-first approach? How do you document these stories and use cases? And you did touch base a little bit when you were answering Carol's question, but it would be good to know maybe additional tools or technologies.
Yeah, I mean, as far as tools and technologies, it really depends on the team and how you collaborate together. And I really think that if it's just you, you could definitely use whatever you're most comfortable with. Obviously, use Word, Excel, etc., and figure out ways to analyze, and you could visually write out story maps and put bits and pieces of information. You probably see a lot of images out there if you Google for UX of people with sticky notes on walls in these war rooms, which is really a great way to collaborate. You could do that at home with the information that you've gathered to figure out how to organize it and make decisions from it. As far as working with teams, I could tell you the team I'm on now, we use version 1, and there's a lot of things we call stories that are backlog items. This is the way Agile pretty much works. And the lingo is more around the tasks that the development team has to perform in order to create a piece of the technology for our users. And what I sometimes have to do, and what I've done even in past jobs, is I need to come up with a set of really easy to understand common language stories. The formula for a development story is usually as a certain type of user. I need to be able to do this sort of activity in order to fulfill this certain desire that I have, or need, some necessity that I have to perform through your experience. I don't think that it needs to be that formal for your design team or for yourself, but it is important to try and figure out, okay, how do these things map together? I know in a previous project, I had to actually make that quick decision with a team that was stuck. Is, okay, I have these documents that are more user-centered and design-based, and we have all these requirements, and now we needed to just map those two major artifacts together to help pass off and see what the connections were. I'm trying to think of what else. We use, so version 1 is an official tool for Agile, which is more on the development side, but I've been more and more immersed in that. And there are a ton of technologies on that side. For me, I write notes in my notebook, pencil, paper, markers, etc. And then I also, from there, in order to facilitate conversations, a simple drawing could start to build out an experience, and you could use things like, you could literally draw little people, show what the interface would look like, what they're going to do there. You could write out a little bit of information down below with what they are doing and maybe why they need to do it and how it feels to use what you're doing. You don't have to put that sort of info in there, but then show step by step through a storyboard or a journey map how this experience is going to be for a user and how they go all the way through the experience or a portion of the experience. Another aspect or tool, I know for more formal digital wireframes, I use Omnigraphal. There are tools like Axure that also do prototypes. If you know any HTML, JavaScript, CSS, you could do some prototypes that way. And some of them could be very simple. It could be just linking images together. And then on the more formal end, once you start to get in the realm of visual design and prototyping, which we already started to talk about, I use a standard Photoshop, but there's also tools like Sketch and InVision. So there are a ton of tools out there. As far as story goes, though, it can be pretty simple. You know, you could put together drawings and throw them into a PDF, scan them in, put them into a PDF, go and talk with someone, or just bring your notebook and show them and walk them through it. Any advice? Was that the next question there?
Yes, it was.
Lindsay?
Linda wanted to know any advice on those who are just starting in the UCD industry, kind of looking to get their foot in the door.
Yeah, so I've talked with people quite often that are just coming in. They're coming over from various industries like business, marketing, any walk of life. And I usually, my first and foremost advice is just start designing. You know, start to look at things in your life that you think you want to change. Start to look at, you know, it could be, oh, I might need an app for this. And the experience doesn't have to be digital, but a lot of times the way you market what you do as a experienced designer is you take something that already exists and start to mock up through drawings and comprehensives or comps what you would like to change in that. And you could even create it like a case study. Look, this is what I had experienced. This is an area where I came into the experience and bumped across like a cliffhanger, as Donna from the user's journey would say, and I wanted to fix that. And so this is what I did: is I put that experience into the hands of a few other people. They had the same issues, or maybe they had issues in different parts of the experience. I asked them to do the same thing I was trying to do, and here's what they bumped up against. Capture that little bit of information, or you know, you could just dive right into the design part, which might not look good for UCD, but might just be good in general to get a few pieces together. And try any part of the process, or you know, do some design and put it in front of people and get their feedback, and just start to put yourself in the position of actively doing the design work. If you're brand new and you don't know any of the tools that are, let's say, in the Adobe Creative Suite, or if, which you don't need to start, you know, you could start to take little video tutorials on various sites to figure out how to get into those deeper areas for design. But a lot of people nowadays seem to as a digital native, they're able to dive in and already have those skills under their belt. Let me know if there's more advice you'd like on that. I usually have in person a lot of pretty valuable advice as well. I know I met up with someone recently, and it was a really great conversation where there was also a lot of more like social dynamic aspects to user-centered design that would be called nowadays the soft skills that you need to make sure you can get the job done even when there's resistance. Any suggestions on integrating UX in an agile process? Was that the next one, Lindsay?
Yes, it was. That's from John.
Okay. All right, great. From John L. Yeah, that's a great question because it is a challenge, and it's I think the way that I've seen it work is, first of all, you all need to collaborate together as often as possible. You have to build up some sort of camaraderie or muscle memory and figure out what works best for your individual team and the dynamics on your team. Second of all, there's two threads of work for UX that I think need to come together with the with the agile process, which is, your day-to-day oversight, where you're working shoulder to shoulder with developers, maybe even doing light prototypes to convey your ideas if needed, and just giving guidance in areas that might not be translating well from whatever you've documented in your design artifacts. And that even includes things that you've designed that now that they're in implementation feel a little bit weird, even though you gave it your best design estimate as to what it should do, and how it should feel for people. Equally important to that shoulder to shoulder daily work is working like a sprint, or what I don't know if this is common to the industry for development in agile, but in our company right now we have this thing called a super sprint. That's like I think it's like 3 sprints, and we have 2 to 3 weeks for each sprint. So it is a lot longer time. This industry that I'm in right now is a little more complicated than a consumer-facing industry. So if you can get ahead of the curve and have designs that the development team needs 3 months or 6 months out, and have that to be a batch of work that you can get in front of people, get some feedback, and then inform and improve through iterative design what you're about to pass over, even though it's not waterfall. At some point, it's best to have all that work done ahead of time with the research and improvements, and then sit down and walk through and do some review work with your development team to get them, some walkthroughs, some kickoff meetings that come from design with the development team and or the team that you work. Maybe you only work with one developer. I'm not sure, but so then you could walk them through, and then that sort of brings it over into that more day-to-day oversight mode of UX. And all the way, keep listening. I think of the developers that I work with in a lot of ways as my users. That's the way I have to build empathy to understand what challenges there are with the technology, the research that has to be done to get things to match the design as close as possible. So I hope that helps in some ways, but this is definitely an area that sorely needs discussions around and always seems to pose challenges, especially where agile is different in different companies, and everyone seems to be, pointing to the upper right, and I think also iterating towards making agile processes work best for their teams. Hopefully that's helpful. I tend to talk.
It looks like we do have just another quick minute to answer maybe 1 or 2 more questions if there's any. If not, we can kind of continue further.
Okay.
So feel free if you have any last minute questions, folks, just type them in the chat box there. And John L. just had additional follow-up questions. How about Lean UX? Would that work in Agile?
Yeah, I think Agile and Lean UX, Lean comes from more of a startup realm, and I think it's a Silicon Valley type of thing. But both of those seem to work best for teams in startups, where you don't necessarily know what you're trying to build ahead of time. You don't have product managers that are out in the field as much as you would in a larger organization. So I think that I know that in the company I work for at Arbor, we seem to have different teams that have different variations of these processes. So there's a team working on one product called Spectrum, and they seem to be more in that lean way, very light on documentation. And we actually have some hybrid scale people who are both designers and developers, and not every UX designer can do that, and not every developer can do that, but they just happen to hire talent that can do that sort of thing, and they're fantastic. So they work in a lean way. They design right in the browser for the most part. We're not designing, let's say, a new brands for the company, so it's mostly all focused on user experience design, not on necessarily colors and all that good stuff. As far as how it works with Agile, um, yeah, I think maybe the question is how user-centered design with lean UX and Agile might work together. And I really think it's just up to the people who are collaborating to figure out on a personal level within a company or a team what's going to work best for us. Last week when this came up, is there a way we can improve that and move forward? And I don't think that's an Agile, lean, or user-centered thing. Maybe it's user-centered because you're thinking of your colleagues as the users. I don't think there's an official way that I know of that's been documented, discussed, etc. Thanks.
All right, so we're the last few minutes of our webinar today, so we're just going to kind of move forward here. As we previously heard Lou mention, he is the program chair for the MS and User-Centered Design program here at Graduate Professional Studies. We're very excited. This program actually launched in fall of last year, so it's a relatively new program. It's really exciting. And just like our other programs that we offer, this program is part-time, fully online. And what's really great is that our courses are taught by experienced professionals in their field, like Lou today. And the program is 30 credits and has 10 courses, 3 of which you can see on the slide there. The first 2, innovation and user-centered design, and the systems thinking and systems mixed course, both are part of the required courses, while the cognitive and social psychology of UCD is an elective. What's also nice too is that students can take up to 2 classes before applying to our program, just to make sure that it's a great fit. Or if you're looking to just jump right into the program, we do have an admissions deadline coming up on December 13th for spring admission. And so feel free to connect with Lou. Here are putting in his social media handles in the chat box here as well, and then you guys can come back to this and view the recording when it's made available if you need to write this information down. But feel free to connect with him. As we've all seen today, he's very knowledgeable. And then finally, if you're looking to connect with GPS, just be sure to connect with us through all of our different social media handles here. You can keep up to date on special events like today's webinar. We do job posting spotlights on our blog, and we also have networking opportunities as well. We just had one in October here, which was a really great way for students to, current students, prospective students, alumni, instructors, everyone from within the Brandeis GPS community just can come and network and talk about their experience, about what they're hoping to do, and have a great time. So we do have events like that, so be on the lookout for our next one. Hopefully sometime soon here we'll have that nailed down. And just if you have any other questions regarding GPS, like questions on our program or course offerings, such as the user-centered design program or our other 10 programs that we offer, I encourage you to reach out to our knowledgeable admissions team. They're really here to help you and guide you through the process from start to finish. So our phone number, and I will type it in the chat box here, 781-736-8787. You can also reach out to us there at gps@brandeis.edu, or like I said, any of our other social media handles. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So just also, as was mentioned earlier, feel free to drop a line on Lou's speaker rate site just to kind of give some thoughts on today's webinar. And I posted that link earlier in the chat box. So Lou, thank you so much for presenting today. It was very exciting. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to all of us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much.
And thanks everyone for attending our webinar this afternoon. And like I said earlier, we'll have a recording made available. Both we'll send it out through email and through the community section on the GPS website. It will get posted there. So again, thanks everyone. And Lou, thank you so much for presenting.